Where secrets aren't buried, they're detonated. This is the story of a woman who gave up an empire to find love, only to be betrayed by the man she gave everything to. This is the billionaire heiress who hid her identity to find true love. Episode 1. The Vow and the Lie. Amara Westbrook stood in the mirror, adjusting the simple silver necklace that dangled above her collarbone. No diamonds, no designer tags, just simplicity, exactly how she wanted to live. The world knew her as the only daughter of Sterling Westbrook, media mogul and tech king. But 6 years ago, she walked away from it all. No assistants, no bodyguards, just a new name, Amara Lane, and a new life in a modest Chicago neighborhood. She wanted one thing: real love, not the kind that bowed to her father's billions. Then she met Jackson. He was charming, rugged, and broke. A struggling architect with dirt under his fingernails and dreams in his eyes. He never asked about her past, and she never offered. Within a year, they were married. It wasn't glamorous, it was intimate. The courthouse, a borrowed dress, and a kiss that felt like a promise. But promises fade. Tonight, she stared at the lipstick-stained collar on Jackson's shirt. Again, not hers. The scent of another woman lingered, floral and cheap. His texts were cryptic. His touch had vanished. And now, he wanted to talk. Amara didn't need the talk. She knew her husband was cheating. She clutched her wedding ring, now feeling like a lie wrapped around her finger. The irony was cruel. She had given up her world to be with someone who would have sold his soul to be in it. Dinner was silent. He played with his food, eyes on everything but her. Then came the words, "I want a divorce, Amara." She blinked slowly, heart cracking but face unreadable. "Why? I'm not happy. I haven't been in a while. There's someone else. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." The betrayal didn't hurt. Not the way it should have. What hurt was the confirmation that all her sacrifices had been for nothing. She whispered, "Does she know you married a woman who could have bought you a city?" He laughed, confused. "What are you talking about?" Amara rose from her seat, calm and chilling. "Pack your things, Jackson. You're about to find out what happens when a Westbrook gets angry." His face twisted. Westbrook? Her lips curled into something dangerous. "You married the billionaire heiress, Jackson, and now you've made her your enemy." Episode 2. You wanted out, now run. Jackson blinked as if the name Westbrook echoed louder in his ears than her voice. "You're lying," he muttered, standing quickly, panic blooming in his eyes. You work at a bookstore. You ride the train. You gave it all up for a life with you," Amara finished, folding her arms. "Because I thought love meant more than money. Because I thought you meant more." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Her silence had always been her sharpest weapon. And right now, she was slicing through every illusion he had. He scoffed, the denial clinging to him like a drowning man to driftwood. No. This is some kind of joke. "You're just mad because you cheated?" she asked, stepping forward. "Because you lied to a woman who trusted you with everything? Or because you assumed I'd be too broken to fight back?" He backed away as if her truth was a wildfire. "I thought you were just a nobody," he whispered. "That's the problem, Jackson," she said, eyes locked on his. "You never wanted to know who I really was." Her phone buzzed. A single name lit up the screen. Forbes Media Confidential. She smiled. The silence was over. The game had begun. Jackson ran a hand through his hair, realization hitting. "Wait, what are you going to do?" "Oh, I'm not going to ruin you, Jackson," she said sweetly. "I'm going to let you do that all by yourself. But first, let's have some fun." 2 days later, the photos surfaced. Jackson, in bed, with his boss's wife. Emails leaked. Conversations exposed. Amara didn't have to say a word, her media team did the talking. He showed up at her doorstep, wild-eyed and furious. "You destroyed me." "No," she said coldly. "You destroyed you. I just let the world see it." Then came the final blow. "By the way, that apartment, the car, the job you loved so much," she said, smirking, "all under a Westbrook shell company. You didn't marry a poor girl, Jackson. You married the bank." He collapsed onto the steps, breathless. Amara leaned in close. "You wanted a divorce? Fine, but don't expect to walk away with anything." Her heels clicked as she walked back inside, slamming the door on everything they once were. Behind it, she stood in the quiet, heart aching, hands shaking but not breaking. because the world was about to remember her name. And this time, she wasn't hiding. Episode 3. Be careful what you cheat on. By the time the world finished reading the headlines, Jackson Thorne had gone from rising architect to digital disgrace. Amara watched it unfold from her penthouse suite, the one he never knew existed. Every news outlet was buzzing. Architect's affair exposed, cheated on billionaire heiress in disguise. From nobody to Westbrook, Amara's hidden empire. She hadn't said a word publicly. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any press conference. But behind closed doors, her heart still bled. She'd loved him. That part hadn't been a lie. She remembered the little things: his hand on her back in crowded places, his coffee made just right, the way he used to say her name like it was sacred. Used to. The man she married was a memory. The man who betrayed her was a stranger. Her phone rang. Her father's voice filled the line, cold and sharp. "You ready to come home now, princess?" "I never left, Dad," she replied. "I just changed my clothes." He chuckled. "Now that the games are over, let's fix your image." Amara's jaw clenched. "My image is fine. I'm not ashamed of falling in love. I'm ashamed of who I trusted." But her father was already moving. Press events, gala invites, appearances. The Westbrooks didn't just recover, they performed. And Amara? She was suddenly the media's new obsession. The cameras loved her. The public admired her vengeance. But all she wanted was silence. One night, while her face flashed across evening news segments, she wandered into her old bookstore. The smell of paper, ink, and rain welcomed her like an old friend. And that's when she saw him, a stranger in a worn leather jacket, reading The Art of Losing. He glanced up. "That one's brutal," he said, lifting the book. "Isn't that the point?" she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. He grinned. "Fair. You look familiar." "I get that a lot." He didn't press, didn't stare too long, just went back to reading, and something inside her shifted. Later, as she walked out, he called after her. "Hey, what's your name?" She turned, the weight of her past pressing on her tongue. She could lie, or "Amara," she said softly, "just Amara." And for the first time in a long time, her name felt like her own. Episode 4. Where masks slip, hearts breathe. His name was Rowan Hale. No designer labels, no flashy talk, just raw honesty and a smile that didn't try too hard. Amara met him again a week later, same bookstore, same corner. Only this time, he brought coffee. "You look like a dark roast kind of woman," he said. She took the cup, curious. "And what do you look like?" "Someone who gets it wrong most of the time." He laughed. There was no flirtation laced with agenda, no greedy eyes sizing up her worth. Rowan looked at her like she was a person, not a headline, not a trophy, not a Westbrook. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she kept coming back. They never spoke of jobs or money, just books, childhood stories, the music they listened to when they couldn't sleep. It was simple, real. But Amara had scars stitched beneath her smile, and she wore them like silk. One evening, while they sat in the rain-dappled window seat of the bookstore, Rowan finally asked, "Why do you always look like you're holding something back?" She froze, fingers tightening around her mug. "Because I am." He nodded, not pushing. "That's fair." And she realized she liked that about him. The way he didn't demand, the way he waited, even if it meant never knowing. But secrets don't stay buried forever. The tabloids were still feasting on her fall and rise. They hadn't caught wind of Rowan yet. But the moment she stepped outside with him that night, her world cracked. A camera clicked from across the street. Just one photo. By morning, it was everywhere. Amara Westbrook seen with mystery man. Is the heiress moving on? From scandal to second chances. Her phone exploded. Her father's voice followed. "Who is he? What does he want?" Amara didn't answer, because for once, she didn't know. She went back to the bookstore. Rowan was waiting with the paper in hand. "So, you're that Amara," he said softly. She expected anger, bitterness, accusation. But instead, he said, "You could have told me." She swallowed. "I didn't want you to treat me differently." "I won't," he said, "unless you lie to me again." Her throat tightened. "I'm not like him." "I believe you," Rowan whispered. "But do you?" That night, she lay awake in her empty penthouse. Jackson had taken her trust, but Rowan was asking for her truth. And she didn't know which was scarier. Episode 5. Hearts on trial. Amara stared at the ceiling long after midnight, replaying Rowan's words. I believe you, but do you? She'd built empires on calculated moves, silenced boardrooms with a glance. But now, her heart felt like a courtroom and she was both defendant and judge. When Jackson cheated, the pain had been sharp but expected. She knew what betrayal looked like. But this chance with Rowan was terrifying, because it felt like hope, and she didn't trust hope anymore. The next morning, she returned to the bookstore with her armor on, sleek black dress, red lips, hair pulled tight. The heiress had returned, but Rowan just shook his head. You're trying to scare me off, he asked gently. I'm showing you what the world sees, she replied. You sure you want this mess? I don't care what they see, he said, standing close. I care about you. Her breath caught. No one had said that in years without strings or shadows. He reached for her hand. So, tell me who you are when no one's watching. And in that quiet corner of a secondhand bookstore, she did. She told him everything. Her fake name, her escape from privilege, the cheating, the headlines, the hurt, all of it. Rowan didn't flinch. When she finished, he said, You're brave, Amara. Not because you left it all, but because you still want love after everything. She didn't know whether to cry or kiss him, but just when her soul began to breathe again, a storm gathered outside. Because Jackson, bitter, humiliated, and broke, had found out about Rowan, and he was about to remind her what happens when ghosts aren't buried deep enough. That evening, she got a call. You need to get down here, said her assistant, voice shaky. Where? Rowan's shop. Police are here. There's been a break-in. She dropped her phone and ran. The bookstore window was shattered. Police lights flashed blue against wet pavement. Rowan stood outside, his jaw bruised, eyes scanning the crowd until he saw her. He walked up slowly. Guess your past isn't done with you yet. Tears stung her eyes. Rowan, I'm okay, he said, but I need to know. Is this how life will be with you? And for the first time, she didn't have an answer. Episode 6. Broken glass and second chances. The police said it was random, but Amara knew better. Rowan had nothing worth stealing. No cash register, no security system, not even a working espresso machine. What he had was her, and that made him a target. Jackson's tantrum wasn't just personal, it was strategic. If he couldn't destroy her, he'd tame the one thing she finally dared to want again. Rowan stood near the broken glass, a silent statue against the chaos. He didn't speak, didn't reach for her. His trust had been cracked, maybe even shattered. She moved toward him anyway. You didn't deserve this. No, he said quietly, but you didn't deserve what he did to you either. The bookstore felt colder now, as if every memory they'd built here had been swept up with the glass. Rowan, I swear, I didn't think this would happen. I thought Jackson was done. You're the one he wants to hurt. Amara, Rowan said, finally meeting her eyes. But I'm the one bleeding for it. And she felt it, his fear, not of her, but of the world that followed her. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. I don't want to be another chapter you regret, he replied. Later that night, as the city quieted, she made a decision. She stood in front of a camera for the first time. In years, not as Westbrook's daughter, not as a broken wife, but as Amara. This is for anyone who's ever loved the wrong person and been punished for it. She began. I gave up everything to find something real. And when I found it, someone tried to destroy it. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. She didn't name Jackson. She didn't need to, but the world connected the dots instantly. Social media exploded. #StandWithAmara trended for hours. And then her father called. That speech cost us 2 board deals, he barked. Then you can buy silence from someone else, she said, hanging up. For once, she didn't care about power. She cared about truth. The next morning, Rowan found her sitting on the curb outside his shop, coffee in hand, hair messy, eyes soft. No cameras today? He asked. Just me, she said. The real me. Broken, tired, honest. He sat beside her. Are we too damaged? She asked. He smiled faintly. Maybe. But sometimes broken pieces fit better than perfect ones. And for the first time, they didn't need promises, just presence. But across the city, Jackson watched her speech from a dingy apartment, eyes burning with something dangerous. He wasn't finished. Not yet. Episode 7. The enemy who once touched her skin. Jackson stared at the screen, Amara's voice playing on loop. She looked radiant, poised, fearless, free. It burned like acid in his chest. He had thought divorcing her would be simple. Take half, move on, enjoy his new lover and the fortune he thought would come with the Westbrook name. But now, he was broke, jobless, disgraced, and she was thriving. Amara Westbrook had become untouchable again, unless he made her bleed. Amara was glowing. After weeks of chaos, Rowan was still here. He'd boarded up the bookstore window, left the glass broken as a reminder some wounds don't need hiding. I want to rebuild, he told her. Not just the store, us. They kissed under neon lights and whispered about futures they hadn't dared dream of. No promises, no lies, just possibility. But peace is a fragile thing. That evening, Amara walked into her apartment and froze. A single rose sat on her kitchen counter, wrapped in black ribbon, with a card. Still think you're safe, Jay? She gripped the counter, breathing in short, sharp gasps. Her security team had seen nothing. The cameras disabled. Whoever left it knew her better than she realized. She called Rowan. I need you to stay away for a while. No, he said firmly. I'm not leaving you alone with this. I can't risk you, she whispered. I already lost enough. But Rowan refused to back down. Amara, you're not alone in this war anymore. 3 days later, the tabloids exploded again. Jackson Thorne accused of stalking, restraining order filed by heiress ex-wife. Amara Westbrook fights back and wins again. She didn't hide this time. She showed up to court in all black, head held high, Rowan beside her. The judge granted the order. Jackson's rights gone, his reputation obliterated. But evil doesn't vanish with a verdict. That night, Amara received a package. Inside, a copy of their wedding photo, burned at the edges, and written in ash across the frame. If I can't have you, no one will. She sat on the floor, shaking. Rowan rushed over, pulling her into his arms. This ends now, he whispered. We end him now. She closed her eyes and nodded. The heiress had played nice. Now it was war. Episode 8. The heiress wears war paint. Fear had been Amara's silent companion for too long. It crept in at night, whispered through cracked doors, and curled around her ribs like smoke. But now, she traded fear for fury. Rowan contacted an old friend, a cyber specialist named Kale, who didn't blink at the words. We need everything on Jackson Thorne. Within hours, Amara had a map of Jackson's secrets. He wasn't just bitter, he was desperate. Loans, fake business pitches, stolen blueprints, even attempts to blackmail former clients. He'd burned every bridge trying to stay afloat after the divorce, and now he was circling the drain. Amara looked at Kale. Can you end him? Kale smirked. Legally or loudly? She glanced at Rowan. Both. 2 days later, Jackson's world began to crumble publicly. A confidential Westbrook contract he'd stolen mysteriously leaked. His investors pulled out. His new girlfriend left him in the middle of a restaurant when security footage aired. Footage of him vandalizing Rowan's bookstore. And Amara, she stood on a stage at a women's empowerment gala, glowing in red silk, accepting an award for resilience. I was once told I was too much, she said. Too loud, too strong, too independent. So I dimmed myself to fit someone's shadow, until I realized my light was never the problem. The crowd roared, cameras flashed, and somewhere in the dark, Jackson watched his hands shaking, his lips curled. He couldn't kill her image, so maybe he'd go after her heart instead. That night, Rowan didn't come home. Amara called twice. No answer. She checked the bookstore, empty. His apartment, silent. Panic slithered through her veins. And then her phone rang from an unknown number. Hello? A voice she hadn't heard in weeks purred. Looks like I finally found your weakness, princess. Her blood turned to ice. If you touch him, I swear. You already swore once, Jackson hissed. You said till death do us part. He laughed and the call went dead. Amara dropped the phone. Her heart thundered. He had Rowan. This wasn't a breakup anymore. This wasn't betrayal. This was warfare. And tomorrow, the heiress would paint the city red. Episode 9. A lover in chains. A lioness unleashed. Amara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked to her closet, opened the safe, and pulled out the steel core flash drive marked Contingency A. It was time to burn the kingdom she helped build if that's what it took to save the man who taught her how to feel again. Rowan sat tied to a rusted chair in an abandoned wine cellar that reeked of mildew and forgotten dreams. His lip was split, one eye bruised. Jackson paced in front of him like a man with nothing to lose. "She made me nothing," he muttered, eyes wild. "She took my name, my power, my future and gave it to you." Rowan spat blood on the floor. "You gave that away the moment you touched another woman." Jackson kicked the chair hard. "You think this is about infidelity? No, this is about a woman who should have obeyed, who should have crawled back." He leaned in, smiling. "But now she'll crawl to me." Meanwhile, Amara sent a single email. Within hours, every major outlet in the city got the same explosive headline, exposing Jackson Thorne, fraud, abuse, and the secret that could end his life. Attached were documents, videos, messages, everything Cale had dug up. It was more than scandal. It was a death sentence. Her father called. "You just declared war on the Thorne family," she replied coldly. "Then let them bleed." She followed a digital trace Cale had planted in Jackson's burner phone, leading her to the edge of the city, to a vineyard no one had touched in years. The moon was full. The wind screamed through the grapevines, and Amara walked in alone wearing red leather gloves, holding a Glock with her name engraved beneath the barrel. She found them in the basement. Jackson froze. "You wouldn't shoot me." She aimed the gun straight at his heart. "Don't test me. You're not this person," he said, inching closer. "You were soft once. Forgiving. Mine." She cocked the gun. "That version of me died the day you touched another woman in our bed." Rowan's eyes met hers. "Amara, I'm here," she whispered, "and I'm not leaving without you." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Cale had already called them. The plan was clean, legal, quiet. But Amara looked at Jackson one last time. "No more warnings," she said. "If you ever breathe near him again, I won't use the law next time." He smiled, blood on his teeth. "Even now, I still own part of your heart." She tilted her head. "No, Jackson. You just left claw marks on it. He's the one who healed it." And then she walked away, with Rowan in her arms, and her past in ruins behind her. But the ending, that comes next. Episode 10. The Heiress and the Man Who Stayed. 3 months later, the world had moved on. The name Jackson Thorne was buried beneath lawsuits, courtrooms, and headlines that reeked of shame. He pled guilty to multiple charges, sentenced without ceremony, a cautionary tale in fine suits and rotting pride. The media tried to spin Amara into a survivor story, the billionaire heiress who fought back. But she wasn't interested in being their symbol. She just wanted her peace. And him. Rowan's bookstore was rebuilt, this time with floor-to-ceiling windows and a quiet reading nook in the corner. Her idea. Amara didn't hide anymore. She didn't change her name when she came in. She didn't wear sunglasses indoors. She didn't flinch when people whispered. She held Rowan's hand, bold and bare. And when a journalist asked, "Was it worth everything you lost?" she smiled gently. "I didn't lose anything. I finally chose me." One evening, as the city dipped into gold, Amara stood behind the counter folding paper stars from a romance novel's torn pages. Rowan watched her in silence, then said, "You never told me why you came into the bookstore that first day." She looked up, smirking, "Because it was the only place on that block with no cameras." He leaned in. "And now?" She kissed him softly. "Now? It's the only place I ever felt seen." Later that night, under the stars, she whispered, "You weren't part of the plan, Rowan." He kissed her shoulder. "Neither was loving you." And it was true. There was no roadmap for what they'd survived. No script for how a woman reclaims her story after betrayal, after chaos, after war. But maybe that was the magic of it. She didn't need a script anymore. She just needed him. Because sometimes, what saves us isn't the crown we wear, but the heart that sees us when the world refuses to. Thank you for listening. And remember, even the strongest fall, but the real ones, they rise louder, only on Voices and Visions.